A retired royal guard went undercover to test his replacement, certain the younger generation couldn't uphold tradition. But when his perfect trap backfired, he discovered he was the one being evaluated all along. Now, before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to our channel, Crown Guard. Now, let's get into it. Captain Jarth Bennett adjusted his civilian overcoat as he approached Windsor Castle, the familiar silhouette stirring memories of the 22 years he'd spent guarding its grounds. The crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of rain-dampened stone and polished brass, smells that had once been as familiar to him as his own reflection. 3 months into retirement, and the sensation of walking these grounds without his uniform still felt like wearing someone else's skin. Just another tourist today, he reminded himself, pulling his cap lower as he joined the gathering crowd. His right leg ached slightly where the shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone during his final deployment. The doctors had called it career-ending. Bennett had called it merely inconvenient. Nevertheless, medical discharge had forced him to surrender his post, his routine, and his purpose. Through discreet inquiries and old connections, Bennett had learned the name of his replacement, Private Thomas Harlow, 24 years old, impeccable record, highly recommended. On paper, the perfect candidate. But papers didn't stand for 8 hours in driving rain. Papers didn't maintain composure when drunken tourists hurled insults. Papers didn't understand what it truly meant to wear the uniform. The standards aren't what they were, his former colleague, Captain Reynolds, had mentioned during their monthly pub meeting. These young ones, they haven't got the same respect for tradition. Treat it like any other posting. The comment had gnawed at Bennett ever since. Windsor wasn't just any posting. It was living history, an unbroken line of duty stretching back centuries. If standards were truly slipping, he couldn't simply stand by and watch. Bennett checked his watch, precisely 10 minutes before the changing of the guard. Perfect timing. He'd observe Harlow's turnout, his bearing, his discipline under the scrutiny of hundreds of eager tourists. The plan was simple. 3 days of anonymous observation, followed by a series of staged tests with the help of his old friend, Major Ashford. Nothing dangerous or extreme, but enough to evaluate whether Harlow truly deserved to stand where Bennett once stood. "Time to see what you're made of, Private Harlow," Bennett murmured as he merged with the crowd gathering for the ceremonial changing of the guard. The ceremony proceeded with clockwork precision. Bennett watched from behind his camera, using it as both prop and shield, as he scrutinized every movement. Private Harlow marched into position with textbook precision, his scarlet tunic and bearskin cap immaculate against the ancient stone backdrop of Windsor Castle. The crowd around Bennett murmured appreciatively, cameras clicking in rapid succession. "Look at how still they stand," a woman with an American accent whispered to her companion. "I couldn't do that for 5 minutes, let alone hours." Bennett's expert eye caught what others missed. Harlow's left glove showed the faintest shadow where it had been recently cleaned of a stain. His rifle placement was perfect, but perhaps a fraction slower than regulation during the ceremonial exchange. The angle of his bearskin cap was precise to the degree Bennett himself had always insisted upon. Small details, invisible to tourists, but glaring to someone who had lived inside that uniform for over 2 decades. Adequate, Bennett thought, his internal assessment more grudging than he'd intended. But there's a difference between performing the motions and embodying the tradition. A young boy, no more than 7, broke away from his parents and ran toward Harlow, waving excitedly. Bennett tensed, watching for Harlow's reaction. The private's eyes remained fixed forward, not even a flicker of acknowledgement crossing his features as the child was gently retrieved by an embarrassed father. "Sorry about that," the father muttered, though Bennett wasn't sure if the apology was directed at the guard or the surrounding tourists. "They're not actually statues, you know," an elderly man commented nearby. "These lads have all served in combat, more than just pretty uniforms, these boys." Bennett glanced at the speaker, noting the regimental tie and the subtle way he stood. Military bearing never truly leaves a man. Their eyes met briefly, a moment of silent recognition passing between them. "Served yourself?" the man asked quietly. 22 years, Bennett replied, his voice equally low. "Queen's Guard." The man nodded respectfully. "Thought as much. You've got the look. Still evaluating your replacement, I see." His eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. Bennett's surprise must have shown, despite his attempts to conceal it. "Did the same thing myself 30 years ago," the elderly veteran explained. "Hard to let go, isn't it? Wondering if the next generation will uphold what you dedicated your life to." Bennett offered a non-committal grunt, uncomfortable with how easily his intentions had been read. He shifted his attention back to Harlow, who remained perfectly motionless as a group of teenage tourists posed for photographs nearby. "He seems competent enough," Bennett admitted reluctantly. "But you're not convinced," the veteran finished for him. "The uniform deserves more than competence," Bennett replied. "It deserves devotion." As the crowd shifted, Bennett moved with it, positioning himself at different angles to observe Harlow more comprehensively. The private's posture remained impeccable, his gaze unwavering despite the circus of tourism swirling around him. Grudgingly, Bennett acknowledged that the superficial elements were all in place, but the true test of a guard wasn't in maintaining appearances when everything went according to plan. It was in the response when things went wrong. The following morning dawned gray and drizzling, the kind of persistent English rain that seemed to seep directly into the bones. Perfect, Bennett thought. Weather had always been the first test of a guard's mettle. Bennett spotted Major Ashford immediately among the thinner Tuesday crowd. Despite his civilian clothes, Ashford carried himself with unmistakable military bearing. His silver hair cropped close in the same style he'd worn for 40 years of service. At 65, Ashford still maintained the physique of a man who considered military standards a lifelong commitment, not just a professional requirement. They exchanged the briefest of nods before taking positions at opposite ends of the visitor area. Private Harlow stood at attention, water beating on his uniform like liquid glass. If the discomfort of wet wool and the weight of a sodden bearskin cap bothered him, it didn't show in his posture or expression. Bennett knew from experience how the water would be seeping through to skin by now, how the weight of the uniform would be testing every muscle. "Let's see how you handle a bit of pressure, lad," Bennett murmured as Ashford began the approach they'd planned the previous evening. "Impressive bit of kit you've got there," Ashford called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Suppose it must get heavy after a while, eh? That rifle real or just for show?" "The rifle question, a classic provocation." Bennett watched intently, noting how Harlow's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his stance remained unchanged. "Do they let you fellows take bathroom breaks, or do you just have to hold it?" Ashford continued, his tone jovial but increasingly intrusive. He took another step closer. "Must say I don't envy you in this weather. Like standing in a cold shower in a fancy dress costume, I'd imagine." A young couple nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances, the woman whispering something to her partner. Bennett recognized the familiar dynamic. Tourists often felt collective embarrassment when one of their number behaved poorly, as though they shared responsibility. "You know, my tax pounds pay your salary," Ashford pressed on, now standing close enough that a palace attendant had begun moving in their direction. "Seems like the least you could do is acknowledge a friendly hello, or perhaps a little song and dance." He chuckled at his own joke. Bennett watched Harlow's eyes closely. The true measure of a guard wasn't in maintaining stillness, but in knowing exactly when that stillness should be broken. In the private's gaze, he detected not irritation or discomfort, but calm assessment, the look of a man measuring a potential threat while remaining fully in control of his response. The palace attendant arrived at Ashford's side. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back behind the rope line." "Just having a friendly chat with our granite-faced friend here," Ashford protested good-naturedly. "Nevertheless, sir, those are the rules." The guards are on active duty. Ashford allowed himself to be guided back, but not before delivering his final test, a deliberate, though not dangerous, violation of protocol. He reached out as if to touch the tassels on Harlow's uniform. The reaction was immediate, but measured. Harlow shifted his rifle position into the formal warning stance, a movement so precise it seemed part of a ceremony rather than a response to provocation. His voice, when it came, carried the perfect blend of authority and restraint. "Step back, sir." 3 words delivered with such command that even Ashford, a decorated major, found himself complying instinctively. The small crowd of onlookers went silent, cameras lowering as they witnessed this rare break in the guard's stoic performance. The attendants seized the opportunity to usher Ashford further back, and the moment passed without escalation. Bennett felt an unexpected flicker of approval. Harlow had followed protocol exactly. No premature reaction, no excessive response, no loss of composure. When intervention became necessary, it was executed with textbook precision. "Well?" Ashford asked later as they met at a cafe several streets away from the castle. "He passed your little test," Bennett admitted, warming his hands around a mug of strong tea. "With flying colors, I'd say," Ashford corrected. "The lad's got proper control. Didn't let me rattle him, but didn't let me cross the line either." Bennett nodded reluctantly. "One test doesn't make a guardsman." "No," Ashford agreed, eyeing his old friend with knowing amusement. "But you're already less certain of your judgment, aren't you?" Bennett didn't answer, but the slight frown creasing his brow was answer enough. Private Harlow had surprised him today, not with his failures, but with his competence. Tomorrow would require different tactics. Wednesday afternoon found Bennett following Private Harlow at a discreet distance as the young guardsman, now in civilian clothes, made his way through the streets of Windsor. Bennett had expected him to head for the local pub, or perhaps his quarters, the natural destinations after a demanding shift. Instead, Harlow boarded a local bus heading toward the outskirts of town. 20 minutes later, Bennett watched with curiosity as Harlow entered the gates of Oakwood Military Rehabilitation Center, a facility Bennett knew well from his own recovery. What business could the young guard have there? Making a quick decision, Bennett followed, using his veteran status to gain entry without raising suspicion. The reception area was warm and institutional, decorated with regimental flags and photographs of royal visits. The sound of laughter guided Bennett down the corridor. He paused at the doorway, staying partially hidden as he surveyed the room. Private Harlow, still ramrod straight despite his casual clothes, was seated among a group of wounded veterans. Some were in wheelchairs, others with visible prosthetics or the 1,000-yard stare of those battling invisible wounds. Harlow led a workshop, his hands steady as he guided veterans through woodworking. "Small movements first," he told a man struggling with a prosthetic arm. "Master the basics before the flourish." Laughter rippled when he joked about sore feet during guard duty. Bennett watched quietly, surprised by the camaraderie. A nurse beside him whispered, "He's been here every Wednesday for 8 months. They respect him because he listens." He even requested this assignment. Straight after his guard shifts, Bennett's view of the young guardsman began to shift. The next day at Windsor, an elderly man collapsed near the barrier. Harlow faced the hardest choice for a guardsman: break protocol or stand still. After 3 seconds, he moved. "Stand aside, please." He knelt, checked vitals, reassured the wife, and worked with security until paramedics arrived. Only then did he brush down his uniform and return to his post. Bennett felt his doubts crumble. Harlow had balanced tradition with humanity perfectly. That evening at the Royal Oak pub, Harlow greeted him directly. "Captain Bennett, I wondered when you'd introduce yourself." Bennett raised his brows. "You know who I am?" "Yes, sir." "The man whose post I assumed." They sat. Bennett praised his emergency response, asking where he learned such skills. 2 tours in Afghanistan, Harlow replied. "Combat medic. Lost men because help came too late. Promised myself I'd never stand by again." "And the rehab center?" "My brother lost his leg. Helping here is repayment." Bennett studied him anew. Why the Queen's Guard with that background? My grandfather stood guard during the Blitz. My father served 16 years. For me, it's family tradition. The uniform means that much? Bennett asked. With respect, sir, it's not the cloth. It's what it represents. Discipline, readiness, and dedication. Bennett admitted. I came to test you. To ensure my replacement was worthy, I knew, Harlow replied. Your observation was deliberate, your interactions telling. Even Major Ashford's provocation carried phrases only a soldier would use. You let me test you. I welcomed it, Harlow said. I studied your record. If anyone could judge me, it was you, Bennett asked, half smiling. Did I pass? Harlow's voice was steady. Your dedication is admirable, but assuming younger generations can't match that commitment, perhaps that deserves reconsideration. The truth struck Bennett hard. He had clung to tradition as if it belonged only to his era. Harlow's words reframed it. We are not owners of tradition, only custodians. The uniform existed before us, and it will endure after EM. I tested you, Bennett admitted. Without realizing the post was never mine to grant. It belongs to duty itself, Harlow agreed. Bennett found himself nodding. Then perhaps we exchange something better than judgment. My experience, your reassurance that what I guarded continues. 3 weeks later, Bennett stood among tourists, watching Harlow march with precision. Their private conversations had bridged generations. Bennett passing down unwritten knowledge, Harlow introducing him to modern guards bringing new skills. Engineers, linguists, combat veterans applying lessons to ceremony. Quite something, isn't it? Major Ashford asked beside him. The changing of the guard, Bennett replied. Not the ceremony, the succession. Bennett's eyes stayed on Harlow. He's not my replacement. He's my successor. That's the difference, Ashford nodded. Replacement suggests loss. Succession means preservation. Bennett smiled faintly. Harlow had invited him to join the military history program, teaching visitors the meaning behind the ceremony. He would no longer guard in uniform, but he would guard the tradition itself. He's a good man, your Harlow, Ashford said. Different in details, Bennett agreed, but the purpose remains constant. As they turned away, Bennett felt at peace. Tradition hadn't ended with him. It had simply continued in another's hands. The tradition continues, he said quietly, just in a different uniform.